It's a question that has been around for as long as people have formed relationships. Should you only date someone from your own culture? For many, the answer comes easily. Some say yes because they believe shared traditions and identities make things easier. Others argue no, because love should be about who a person is, not where they come from. The truth is, both sides have valid points, but when the topic is examined closely, insisting that you can only date within your culture creates more harm than good. It narrows human connection, fuels judgment, and often hides behind moral relativism, the belief that what's right or wrong depends entirely on cultural norms. Starting with the positives. Dating within your culture has understandable advantages. Shared language, customs, and family expectations reduce stress in everyday life. A couple that understands the same jokes, values the same festivals, and eats the same traditional foods may find communication and bonding come naturally. For instance, someone from an Indian background might want to celebrate Diwali, and their partner, having grown up the same way, would instantly understand its meaning and emotional weight. Similarly, people from strongly religious communities often find comfort knowing that their dating partner practices the same faith. Studies in sociology and psychology consistently show that people tend to be drawn to what feels familiar. Cultural similarity often translates into smoother communication and fewer conflicts about values or family roles. There's also a practical side. Families, especially in tight-knit or traditional communities, may be more supportive when both individuals share the same heritage. Approval from parents and elders can shape how successful a relationship feels, especially in cultures where marriage involves not just two people, but two families. However, those benefits come with a hidden cost. When someone believes they must stay within their culture, they start deciding relationships based on group identity rather than individual character. That's a subtle but dangerous shift. Culture can shape who we are, but it never defines our hearts, empathy, or emotional intelligence. If someone from one culture grows close to another person with different traditions or beliefs, that connection is not less real. In fact, cross-cultural relationships often lead to more understanding between communities. When two people from different backgrounds fall in love, they not only blend traditions, they challenge stereotypes. Each learns about the other's world, and by doing so, humanizes it. Choosing to only date within your culture can also lead to an us versus them attitude. It may begin as pride, but often drifts into prejudice. There's a fine line between cultural preference and closed-mindedness. If the idea turns into believing that people from other backgrounds are unsuitable for love or marriage, that's no longer self-protection, it's exclusion disguised as tradition. One of the biggest counter-arguments people raise is that dating across cultures creates endless problems. Differences in family structure, communication style, or holiday traditions can cause confusion and even resentment. A couple might disagree about how to raise children, what religion they should follow, or which parent they should visit first for holidays. Those are real challenges, but the truth is, every relationship involves learning to manage differences. Two people from the same culture can still fight about values, responsibilities, and goals. Shared culture doesn't guarantee harmony. What matters most is communication, mutual respect, and a willingness to understand each other. Research on intercultural relationships support this. Studies from the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships find that multicultural couples often develop stronger conflict resolution skills because they have no choice but to learn deep listening and compromise early on. They tend to talk more openly about assumptions and differences instead of taking them for granted. That can actually strengthen emotional intimacy. Sometimes people fear judgment from family or community members. If they date outside their culture, this fear is valid since cultural expectations can carry enormous pressure, but traditions change with people's actions. Every time someone forms a relationship based on individual compatibility rather than cultural prescription, they quietly expand what their community sees as normal. This discussion ties closely to moral relativism, the idea that what's morally right or wrong depends entirely on culture or context. On the surface, it sounds tolerant. It says every culture has its own way of living, so we shouldn't judge others. But taken too far, this outlook becomes deeply harmful. If morality depends purely on what a culture believes, then anything can be justified. A society could treat certain groups unfairly or suppress individuals and still call it right, simply because their culture approves of it. For example, if one culture believed arranged marriages without consent were acceptable centuries ago, moral relativism would claim that was morally right, then wrong later, once the culture changed. So morality swings like a pendulum based on popularity rather than truth. That's not real morality. Right and wrong cannot shift every time public opinion or law does. Otherwise, we would have no solid ground to criticize slavery, segregation, or gender inequality when they were accepted norms. Cultures do change morally, but not because truth changes, because people begin to recognize what justice and compassion actually require. In the context of dating, moral relativism supports cultural gatekeeping. It allows someone to say, it's right for me to only date people from my culture because that's what my culture believes, even if it restricts love or encourages prejudice. By defending cultural exclusivity as morally valid just because a group accepts it, moral relativism traps people in outdated ways of thinking. When examined logically, that's inconsistent. If tomorrow that same culture embraced intercultural relationships, the relativist would have to say, now this is morally right too. How can both be right when the underlying principle hasn't changed? The truth is, culture alone shouldn't define morality. Conscious, empathy, and rational thinking should. The cultural dating question also connects to a similar mindset, believing you must date someone with the same career or social position. This idea, though common, is just as limiting. People sometimes say couples should align professionally because it ensures understanding. A doctor should date another doctor, or a lawyer should find another lawyer. While shared career experiences can foster connection, the belief that someone outside the circle is unworthy of love or unable to relate is unfair. A healthy relationship doesn't depend on identical work schedules or shared income levels. It depends on how two people support each other's goals, cope with stress, and respect differences in lifestyle. Plenty of couples from completely different professions thrive because they offer each other fresh perspectives. A teacher dating an engineer might bring emotional insight into the relationship that a partner from the same field might not. When people chase partners from identical career paths, they often do so out of fear of being misunderstood. But that same fear can block them from meeting someone who complements rather than copies them. Love is not a resume match. It's a connection of values, humor, patience, and shared curiosity about life. The most harmful part of cultural and career-based dating rules is the silent message behind them, that there's a right kind of person to love. Once people internalize that belief, they start judging not just others, but themselves. Someone might reject a kind, compatible partner because of cultural expectations, only to regret it later. Another person might feel inadequate because their profession or background doesn't meet someone else's standards. This mindset also creates cycles of gatekeeping that reinforces social division. The more people insist on staying within boundaries, be they cultural or professional, the harder it becomes to build empathy across those boundaries. The world becomes a patchwork of isolated groups defending their sameness instead of celebrating their differences. History shows what happens when moral relativism and cultural gatekeeping combine. Societies grow less compassionate. Laws change, but mindsets don't always follow. For example, once societies began mixing through trade, education, and migration, some individuals use moral relativism to justify segregation, saying our culture simply does things differently. That excuse delayed progress for decades. When we let culture decide right and wrong, we silence reason and slow moral growth. Rejecting dating based on culture or career doesn't mean rejecting culture itself. Cultural pride can be beautiful. Learning your heritage, honoring your ancestors, and sharing traditions can strengthen personal identity. The key differences lie in whether that pride is inclusive or exclusive. Proud people share their culture without using it to draw dividing lines. A better moral view starts with seeing individuals as individuals, complex, evolving, and shaped by countless influences beyond race, profession, or tradition. Dating someone different from you doesn't mean abandoning your roots. It means recognizing that other people have roots too, and they matter just as much. Choosing love freely, without artificial limits, celebrates both common humanity and the richness of cultural diversity. It shows that while customs and laws may change, the core values of empathy, fairness, and understanding remain steady. Those values, not cultural relativism, form the real foundation of ethics. So, should you really date within your culture? You can, but you don't have to, and you certainly shouldn't feel morally obligated to. Culture can enrich relationships, but it should never set boundaries for them. When moral relativism and social conformity tell us that something is right or wrong purely because tradition says so, they rob individuals of the chance to think and choose for themselves. A culture doesn't become wiser by sheltering its people from others. It grows by letting them experience love, respect, and friendship beyond familiar lines. Saying that morality changes every time culture changes is dangerous because it erases accountability. Right and wrong should be rooted in human dignity, not cultural convenience. And when it comes to relationships, that means looking beyond cultural or career boxes. The best partner is not the one who mirrors your background perfectly, but the one who shares kindness, patience, and the courage to grow with you. Real love happens when people see each other for who they are, not what category they belong to. Thank you for watching and have a good day.